The old house at the end of Maple Street had always been a mystery to the neighborhood. Its windows were perpetually dark, its lawn overgrown, and its porch creaked with every gust of wind. No one had seen the owner in years, and the children dared each other to run up to the door and knock, though none ever did. That is, until my daughter, Lily, decided to make friends with the boy who lived there. Lily had always been a curious child, the kind who would bring home stray animals and strike up conversations with strangers. So, when she told me she had made a new friend named Elias, I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was when she mentioned where he lived. "He's really nice, Mom," she said, her eyes bright. "He just moved here and he doesn't have any other friends yet." I tried to hide my unease. The house at the end of Maple Street had been abandoned for as long as I could remember. But Lily insisted Elias lived there, and she even brought home a drawing he had made for her, a strange, intricate sketch of a tree with twisted branches and symbols etched into its bark. It was unsettling, but I chalked it up to a child's imagination. A week later, Lily asked if Elias could come over for a play date. I hesitated, but she was so excited and I didn't want to disappoint her. "Sure," I said, "but I'll need to meet his parents first." Lily nodded eagerly and ran off to tell him. That evening, I received a call from a woman who introduced herself as Clara, Elias's mother. Her voice was soft and melodic, almost hypnotic. She apologized for not reaching out sooner and explained that they had been busy settling into the old house. She sounded kind, and when she offered to bring Elias over the next day, I agreed. The following afternoon, Clara arrived with Elias. He was a quiet boy with pale skin and dark, hollow eyes. He barely spoke, but Lily didn't seem to mind. They played in the backyard while Clara and I sat on the porch, sipping tea. She was polite and charming, but there was something off about her, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. She spoke in riddles at times, her words laced with cryptic phrases that made me uneasy. "Children are so pure, aren't they?" she said at one point, her gaze fixed on Lily and Elias. "They see the world in ways we've forgotten. Elias has always been special. He sees things others can't." I forced a smile, unsure how to respond. When it was time for them to leave, Lily begged for Elias to stay the night. Clara hesitated but eventually agreed. "Just this once," she said, her voice tinged with something I couldn't identify. Reluctance, maybe, or fear. That night, I tucked Lily and Elias into the guest room. They were giggling and whispering, and I felt a pang of relief. Maybe I had been overthinking things. As I closed the door, I heard Lily say, "Tell me more about the tree, Elias." I didn't sleep well that night. At some point, I woke to the sound of faint whispering. I assumed it was the kids, but when I checked on them, they were both fast asleep. The whispering seemed to be coming from the walls, a low, guttural murmur that sent chills down my spine. I told myself it was just the wind and went back to bed. The next morning, Elias was gone. His bed was neatly made and there was no sign of him. Lily was still asleep, so I called Clara, but the number she had given me was disconnected. Panicked, I drove to the house at the end of Maple Street. When I arrived, it was as dark and lifeless as it had always been. The windows were boarded up and the front door was locked. I knocked, but no one answered. I tried to convince myself that Elias had simply gone home early, but deep down I knew something was wrong. When Lily woke up, she didn't seem to remember Elias at all. "Who's Elias?" she asked, her brow furrowed in confusion. I didn't push her. I didn't know what to say. Over the next few days, I searched for any trace of Clara and Elias, but it was as if they had never existed. The drawing Elias had given Lily was gone too, and the whispering at the walls had stopped. Weeks passed and life returned to normal, or so I thought. Then, one evening, I found Lily in the backyard, staring at the old oak tree. She was holding a stick, carving symbols into the bark, the same symbols from Elias's drawing. "Lily, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. She turned to me, her eyes distant and unfamiliar. "He's coming back, Mom," she said. "Elias said he'd show me the other side." I didn't know what to do. I still don't. Every night I hear the whispering again, louder now, and I see Lily standing by the window, staring at the house at the end of Maple Street. It's not abandoned anymore. The lights are on, and I swear I can see Elias standing in the window watching us. I don't know how to protect her. I don't know if I can. My grandmother always said the woods behind our house were alive, not in the way trees grow or animals move, but in a way that felt aware. She'd warned me never to go too far into them, especially after dark. "The woods don't like strangers," she'd say, her voice low and serious. I never took her seriously until the summer I turned 12. That summer, my parents decided to renovate the old farmhouse we'd inherited from my grandparents. It was a massive project, and they spent most of their time arguing with contractors or buried in blueprints. I was left to my own devices, which usually meant exploring the property. The woods were my favorite place. They were dense and quiet, with a stillness that felt almost sacred. But that summer, the woods changed. It started with the whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the sound was too deliberate, too rhythmic. It was like someone, or something, was trying to speak to me. The whispers would stop the moment I turned my head, leaving only the rustle of leaves in their wake. I told myself it was my imagination, but the feeling of being watched never went away. One afternoon, I found something strange. Deep in the woods where the sunlight barely reached, there was a clearing I'd never seen before. In the center of the clearing stood a tree unlike any I'd ever seen. Its bark was blackened as if it had been burned, and its branches twisted unnaturally like they were reaching for something. At the base of the tree was a small, shallow hole. Inside the hole was a doll. It wasn't just any doll. It was old, its porcelain face cracked and stained, its dress tattered and faded. Its eyes were the worst part. They were too lifelike, too human. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stared at it, but I couldn't look away. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. The moment I touched it, the whispers stopped. The woods fell silent. I took the doll home, hiding it under my bed. That night I had the first dream. In the dream I was standing in the clearing, the blackened tree looming over me. The doll was in my hands, but its eyes were open, staring at me with a malice that made my blood run cold. It whispered something I couldn't understand, its voice low and guttural. I woke up screaming, the doll clutched tightly in my arms. The dreams didn't stop. Every night I found myself back in the clearing, the doll's whispers growing louder, more insistent. During the day, I felt like I was being watched. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the corner of my eye, but when I turned, there was nothing there. The doll's presence seemed to seep into every corner of the house. My parents noticed the change in me, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I jumped at every sound, but they were too preoccupied with the renovations to ask questions. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the doll and ran back to the clearing, determined to return it to the hole where I'd found it. The woods were darker than usual, the air thick and heavy. As I approached the tree, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. I dropped the doll into the hole and started to back away, but something stopped me. The doll's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with the strength that shouldn't have been possible. Its eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I understood the whispers. "You shouldn't have taken me," it said, its voice a mixture of a child's and something much older, much darker. "Now you're mine." I woke up in my bed, drenched in sweat. The doll was gone, but the marks on my wrist, 5 small bruise-like indentations, were real. I never went back to the woods after that. My parents finished the renovations and sold the house a year later. I never told them what happened, and they never asked. Years have passed, but I still dream about the clearing sometimes. The whispers are quieter now, but they're always there, lingering at the edge of my consciousness. I tell myself it was just a nightmare, a product of an overactive imagination. But deep down, I know the truth. The woods are alive, and they haven't forgotten me. When my daughter Clara turned 6, she started having nightmares. At first, they were the usual kind: monsters under the bed, shadows in the closet, things that could be soothed with a nightlight and a hug. But then the nightmares changed. They became specific. She would wake up screaming about the man in the corner, describing him in vivid detail: tall, with a long coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and no face. Just smooth, blank skin where his features should be. I tried to reassure her, telling her it was just a bad dream, but the descriptions were too consistent, too detailed for a child her age. She'd never seen anything like it in movies or books. And then, one night, I saw him too. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of Clara crying. I rushed to her room, expecting to find her tangled in her blankets, but she was sitting upright in bed, staring at the corner of the room. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. "He's here," she whispered, pointing to the corner. I turned, expecting to see nothing, but there he was, the man she had described, tall with a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. His face was smooth and featureless, like a mannequin. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, looming in the shadows. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I couldn't move. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. The corner was empty. I tried to convince myself it was sleep deprivation, a trick of the light, anything but what it seemed. But Clara's nightmares didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. She started sleepwalking, wandering the house at night, always heading toward the same spot, the basement door. The first time it happened, I found her standing in front of the door, her small hand resting on the knob. She was muttering something under her breath, too low for me to hear. I gently guided her back to bed, but the next night she was there again, and the night after that. Each time she'd stand in front of the door, whispering the same phrase over and over. "He's waiting for me." I started locking the basement door, but it didn't stop her. She'd just stand there, rattling the knob, her voice growing more frantic. "He's waiting for me. He's waiting for me." One night, I decided to follow her. I waited until she started sleepwalking, then quietly trailed behind as she made her way to the basement door. She didn't try the knob this time. Instead, she knelt down and pressed her ear to the door, as if listening for something. Then, in a voice that wasn't hers, a deep, guttural growl, she said, "I'm coming." I grabbed her and shook her awake, my heart pounding. She blinked up at me, confused, and asked why we were in the hallway. I didn't know what to say. The next day, I decided to investigate the basement. I hadn't been down there in years. It was just storage, old boxes, and forgotten furniture. But as I descended the stairs, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The air was heavy, oppressive, like the walls were closing in. I searched the basement, but there was nothing unusual, just dust and cobwebs. Then, in the far corner, I noticed something. A small, rusted door, barely visible behind a stack of boxes. It was old, the kind of door you'd find in a cellar, with a heavy iron latch. I pushed the boxes aside and tried the latch, but it was stuck. As I struggled with it, I heard a sound from the other side, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on the door. I froze. The tapping stopped, and for a moment, there was silence. Then a voice, low and distorted, like it was coming from deep underground, whispered, "Let me out." I stumbled back, my heart racing. The voice wasn't human. It couldn't be. I ran up the stairs and locked the basement door behind me, my hands trembling. That night, Clara didn't sleepwalk. She didn't even have a nightmare. But as I lay in bed, I heard it again. The tapping. It was coming from the basement, slow and deliberate, like someone was trying to get my attention. I pulled the covers over my head and tried to block it out, but it didn't stop. It went on for hours until the first light of dawn crept through the windows. The next morning, I called a contractor to seal the basement door. I didn't tell him why, just that I wanted it permanently closed. He did the job quickly, covering the door with drywall and painting over it. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, Clara started sleepwalking again. This time, she didn't go to the basement door. She went to the wall where the door had been. She stood there, her small hands pressed against the drywall, whispering, "He's still waiting." I don't know what to do. The tapping hasn't stopped. It's quieter now, muffled by the drywall, but it's always there. A constant reminder that something is waiting, just on the other side. I tell myself it's my imagination, that I'm just hearing things. But deep down, I know the truth. The man in the corner isn't gone. He's just waiting for the right moment to come back.